Has Russia broken Ukrainian lines in Bakhmut? Is the fall of Bakhmut to Russian hands imminent? And what does it mean for Ukraine's counteroffensive? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's April 27th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Of course, you guys know I get my videos demonetized all the time. So if you want to support what I do, I have a website, combatvetnews.com. It's got all the news stories I can't get to in the daily updates, as well as all my YouTube videos, all for free. And if you want to support what I do, become a member and get access to members-only content, especially including the footage that I can't show you here on YouTube. This is the GoPro footage from the trenches that gives us insight that we can't get anywhere else. I do the breakdowns every week, as well as all the old Patreon archives. It's a great way to get insight into the war, and more importantly, support what I do. It's the primary way at this point that I make a revenue stream from this, and it lets me do this every day. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what has been going on. The biggest news is here in Bakhmut. As you guys can see, Ukrainian forces have been pushed to the western outskirts of the city. Considerable advances by Russian troops, again, in the center. And as you can see, this is part of a systematic effort that really has been a lightning effort by Russian troops since they've secured this rail line here. They have pushed hard and fast in the last really week. You can see that huge portions of the city have been taken by Russian forces. And while Russia's overall op tempo is fairly slow, you can see here just 54 attacks across the front lines. You can see they're finally starting to coordinate. And this itself is both dangerous because it means that the Russians are improving their command and control, but it also means that probably some of the best trained Russian units are here in Bakhmut. They're focusing their efforts on achieving this victory here. And to a lesser extent, they appear to also be working in Avdiivka, where they're making much slower progress. But I think this taking of Bakhmut is probably going to culminate the Russian offensive and will complete their transition to the defense. And that is what sort of worries me about this. It's not clear that the Ukrainian forces are going to launch this counteroffensive, right? And when we see one of the stories in the news, again, Ground News, sponsor of the channel. I do always link to them in the description if you want to support what they do. But NATO's reporting that they've sent everything that Ukraine is going to get. Allies have sent almost all promised combat vehicles to Ukraine, NATO chief says, which means that 98% of those combat vehicles promised to Ukraine during the invasion and war have arrived, including 1,500 armored vehicles, 230 tanks and other equipment. That's in addition to the captured Russian tanks and other tanks that Ukraine has been refurbishing and putting back on the battlefield. So there's also have trained and equipped more than 9 Ukrainian brigades. This is the clearest signal yet that the fighting, that the offensive is ready. And the question is just where it will be. And this is one of the things that I found sort of interesting. The Ukrainian or the UK's Ministry of Defense points out that Russia has actually fortified the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And as you guys probably know, that power plant located, I think, right here. And they fear that there will be some sort of fighting taking place. I think it's not. I think, honestly, it's not militarily unreasonable to establish a basic defensive structure in this power plant. I think fighting at a place like this is absolute madness. I highly doubt Ukraine's going to do it. As we've seen, highly developed areas, they're just not suitable for fighting. What's much more likely is that if for some reason the fighting does take place here, again, you can see it's not likely to happen because of this giant reservoir. Right? These giant water obstacles, they're really hard to cross, right? Imagine getting 50,000 people as well as equipment and everything else across this river when you could just cross on a road like a regular army. It's unlikely to happen. And it's even less likely that the army will extend its supply lines and shorten Russian supply lines, right? That's often what you have to do in an offensive, but it's not what you should strive to do. So the chances of there being fighting here is limited. And if there is fighting, again, you are way more likely to see this open terrain that Ukraine would simply try to cut them off and ideally force a withdrawal from the power plant before completing its encirclement, right? That's what you're almost certainly likely to see. It's not a great sign that Russia's stationing troops there, but again, I think what Russia just wants to preempt is Ukraine attempting to use this neutral site as a bridgehead of sorts. I don't think, again, that's something Ukraine would do, but it's something that Russia probably is their commanders are prudently preparing for it. Where Russia is apparently building significant defense works is here in Zaporizhzhia, and it makes sense. The terrain is favorable, the human terrain is favorable, the potential for real meaningful battlefield effects in the course of the war is substantial. It's just a it's an obvious target, but sometimes the obvious target's too obvious. I actually think there's a medium chance that you may see these Ukrainian brigades show up even somewhere like Bakhmut itself, where it's the place where Russia has transitioned the least to the defense. Yes, there are some of the best Russian forces here, but it also means that those Russian forces are not arrayed in the defense. And sometimes it can be better to just confront the best Russian forces with your freshest, most well-trained, well-equipped troops, especially when they are on their back foot. It actually wouldn't surprise me. And then once you've done so, of course, you can push deep into places like Luhansk. And while this terrain is not necessarily as favorable, you guys can see there's a lot of places where light infantry, right, can hide out, establish defensive zones. It's a convoluted mess of roads and and villages and terrain, but it's territory that also has to be taken. And as you can see in the Kharkiv offensive, right, that territory was much, much, much more open and much more favorable to the quick, speedy offensives. So I actually think that there is a chance. I think if I were a betting man, I would bet my largest sum on a Zaporizhzhia-based offensive, followed. Honestly, I don't think they're going to go into Bakhmut, but I think Bakhmut should actually be the number 2 place. Or I'm saying Bakhmut, Krasnohora, Soledar, Kuryumivka confront Russia's elite troops on day 1 when they are postured to conduct offense, right? Break these guys, grind them out, and then engage, liberate the remainder of territory. Easier said than done. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support. Thanks to our lieutenant tier members who always support us on combatvetnews.com. Thanks to our colonel tier members. You guys are absolutely brilliant. I love you guys. And I'll see you in the next one.